The call came on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just pulled a pan of cornbread out of the oven, and the kitchen smelled the way it always did when I cooked for company. Warm, a little sweet, like something good was about to happen. My son had said he'd call that evening. I'd been looking forward to it all day. I set the pan on the stovetop and wiped my hands on my apron before I picked up the phone. "Mom." That's all he said. Just that one word, and I already knew something was wrong. A mother can hear it, not in the word itself, but in the half-second of silence before it. "What's the matter, honey?" He didn't answer right away. I heard him exhale. I heard something in the background, maybe the television, maybe his fiancée's voice saying something I couldn't make out. "The wedding's in 6 weeks," he said. "You know that." "I know that," I said. "I've had it on my calendar since February." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, I think it'd be better if you didn't come." I stood there in my kitchen with the cornbread cooling on the stove, and I felt the floor shift underneath me. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, just a quiet, disorienting tilt. The way the world moves when something you were certain of turns out not to be certain at all. "I'm sorry," I said, because I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. It's complicated. Amanda and I talked about it, and we both think the dynamic it'd just be easier, Mom. For everyone. Easier." He said easier. I had worked double shifts at the hospital laundry for 11 years to make his life easier. I had driven him to every baseball practice in a car with a broken heater, wrapped in 2 coats with a defroster blasting hot air that smelled like burning. I had eaten peanut butter sandwiches 3 times a week so he could have new cleats, new textbooks, whatever it was that year that he needed. Easier. "Okay," I said. That's what came out. Not the things I was thinking. Just okay, in a voice that didn't sound like mine. He said something else after that. Something about still wanting to have dinner with me afterward. Something about how it wasn't personal. How Amanda's family was very traditional and large, and they wanted to keep the guest list small. I don't remember all of it. I remember the cornbread. I remember staring at it and thinking, I made this for no one. After we hung up, I sat down at my kitchen table. Just sat there. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, my neighbor Mrs. Tatum was mowing her yard. Normal sounds. Regular Tuesday sounds. And I sat in the middle of them feeling like I had just been informed of a death. Except the thing that had died didn't have a name yet. I should tell you something about my son. His name is Craig. He is 34 years old, and he is, genuinely, a good person. Or at least I believe that, and still mostly believe it, even now. He grew up in a small house in Decatur, Georgia, just the 2 of us after his father left when Craig was 7. We were close, the way people get close when they only have each other. We ate dinner together every night. We watched the same shows. He used to fall asleep on the couch with his head on my leg, and I would sit very still so I wouldn't wake him, even when my leg had gone completely numb. He met Amanda 3 years ago at some work event in Atlanta. She is pretty and organized, and her family has money. Old money, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. They have a house in Buckhead. Her father golfs with people whose names you'd recognize. I went to dinner with all of them once, about 6 months into Craig and Amanda's relationship, and I wore my nicest blouse and tried to be charming, and I could feel, the whole evening, that I was not quite what they had been hoping for. I work. I have always worked. I'm 63 years old, and I still pick up 2 shifts a week at the hospital, not because I have to, but because sitting still has never suited me. I live in a 3-bedroom house that I bought myself in 1998. It is not in Buckhead. It does not have a circular driveway or a wine cellar. It has a front porch with a swing that needs repainting and a backyard where I grow tomatoes every summer. That is who I am. That is who Craig's mother is. I don't know when that stopped being enough. After the phone call, I went through the stages you go through. I cried once in the shower, where I've always cried when I didn't want anyone to know. I called my sister Bet in Columbus and told her what happened, and she said things that were kind and probably true, and it didn't help much. I prayed, although I'll admit my prayers felt more like complaints than anything else. I lay awake at night, turning it over, looking for the part where I had gone wrong. I also, somewhere in those first 2 weeks, got angry. I am not an angry person by nature. I've spent most of my life being the one who smooths things over, who says it's fine when it isn't, who brings the potato salad to the difficult family gathering and smiles until her face hurts. But there is a particular kind of anger that comes from being erased by someone you raised. And it doesn't feel like regular anger. It feels like clarity. Like finally seeing the shape of something you'd been trying not to look at directly. I was not going to pretend this was fine. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do about it. The thing that changed everything happened at the Publix on Ponce de Leon of all places. It was a Thursday morning about 3 weeks before the wedding. I was buying groceries, moving through the store the way you do when you're not really thinking, reaching for things, putting them in the cart, going through the motions. I turned down the coffee aisle and nearly collided with another woman's cart. We both apologized at the same time. Then we both laughed. That small, startled laugh of near misses. She was around my age, maybe a year or two older. White hair cut short, practical. Nice eyes. She had a box of Folgers in her hand, and she looked, I thought, like someone who had recently been crying and was doing a decent job of hiding it. "Sorry about that," she said again, shifting her cart. "My fault," I said. I wasn't looking where I was going. We did the small smile of strangers who are about to move on. But she didn't move on. She just stood there for a second, looking at the coffee she was holding like it had offended her. "You ever have one of those weeks," she said, not quite to me, not quite to herself, "where you go to the grocery store just to be around people?" I stopped. "Yes," I said. "Actually, yes." Her name was Opal. She told me that while we stood in the coffee aisle for 10 minutes longer than either of us had planned. She had driven down from Marietta the day before to spend some time with her daughter, who lived in Decatur, and then, while she was already in town, to try to talk sense into her son, who lived in Buckhead. Her son. Buckhead. I felt something shift. "What's your son's name?" I asked, careful. "Derek," she said. "Derek Whitmore." She paused. "He's getting married next month." I set my hand on the handle of my cart. "To a woman named Amanda," I said. She looked at me. Really looked at me. And I watched her face go through the same thing mine probably just went through. That slow, strange arithmetic of coincidence that doesn't feel like coincidence at all. "You're Craig's mother," she said. "I'm Craig's mother," I said. We stood there in the grocery store staring at each other. Then she said, very quietly, "They told me not to come either." We left our carts in the aisle and went and got coffee at the little cafe counter near the deli. We sat there for 2 hours. I missed an appointment. I don't think either of us noticed the time passing. Opal told me about her son the way I had told Bet about mine, with that particular exhaustion of a parent who has been loving someone into adulthood and finds, on the other side of all that love, a stranger. Derek was 36. He had grown up with Opal and his father in Marietta, comfortable but not wealthy, the son of a contractor and a school librarian. He had done well. He had more than done well. And somewhere along the way in his doing well, Opal had become, in his mind apparently, something that didn't fit the picture. His exact words, she said, turning her coffee cup around in her hands, were that he needed to protect the dynamic. Protect the dynamic. I thought about easier. Same word, different costume. I told her about Craig, about the 11 years of double shifts. about the baseball cleats. She told me about the student loans she had taken out in her name so Derek could finish his MBA without debt, about the holidays she had driven through ice storms to reach him, about the way he used to call her every Sunday until about 2 years ago, when the calls started getting shorter and further apart, and then almost stopped. We were not comparing wounds exactly, but we were recognizing them, the same shape, the same origin, held by two different women in the same cafe on the same Thursday morning. "What are you going to do?" she asked me. "I don't know yet," I said. "What about you?" She looked out the window for a moment. There was a woman outside walking a very small dog. We both watched it for a second. "I think," Opal said slowly, "that I am going to be there for my son's wedding, because I am his mother, and I was not told I could not come. I was told it would be better if I didn't." She looked at me. "Those are not the same thing." I turned that over in my mind. She was right. They are not the same thing. I drove home with my groceries and I sat with what she had said for 2 days. I turned it over the way I used to turn math problems over in my head when I was young, looking for the angle that made it solvable. Craig had said it would be better if I didn't come. He had not said I was not allowed. He had not said there was no room. He had said easier. He had said better. He had asked me to make myself small. He had been asking me to do that for a while, I realized, and I had been complying without quite understanding that was what I was doing. I called Opal on the Friday before the wedding. "Are you still going?" I asked her. "I am," she said. "Then I'm going with you," I said, "if you'll have me." A pause. "Then I'll pick you up at 11. The wedding was on a Saturday in May at a venue out in Peachtree City. One of those plantation-style event spaces with white columns and manicured grounds and a parking lot full of expensive cars. I had driven past it once before, years ago, and thought it was beautiful. Standing in the parking lot that morning in my blue dress, watching other guests file toward the entrance, I still thought it was beautiful, in the distant way that things are beautiful when they don't belong to you. Opal was wearing burgundy. She looked, I thought, like a woman who had decided something. I hoped I looked like that too. We walked in together. I want to be clear about what that looked like, because I know how it sounds. Two mothers showing up uninvited, making a scene, disrupting everything. That is not what happened. There was no confrontation in the parking lot. There was no shouting. We walked through the front entrance of the venue, collected programs from a young woman who smiled and handed them to us without hesitation, and found 2 seats near the back on the groom's side. We sat down. That was it. We sat in the back, in our dresses, with our programs on our laps, and we waited for the music to start. I saw Craig before he saw me. He was standing with the groomsmen near the side door, laughing at something. He looked handsome. He was wearing a gray suit I had never seen before, a new tie, a boutonniere that matched the flowers on the altar. He looked like a man at the beginning of something, which is what he was. And whatever else I was feeling, I felt that too. The specific, complicated love of watching your child stand at the threshold of a life you helped build. Then he turned and scanned the room, and his eyes found me. I watched his face. He went very still. He looked at me, then at Opal beside me, then back at me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't do anything. I just looked at him with the kind of quiet steadiness that a person arrives at only after they've already cried everything out, and there's nothing left to do but stand in their own truth. He looked away. The music started. I don't know how to explain what it is like to watch your child get married from the back of the room, in a seat you were not meant to occupy, at a ceremony you were not supposed to attend. It is not simple. The grief and the love get tangled up in a way that doesn't untangle neatly. Not that day, and maybe not ever. I cried during the vows quietly into a tissue I had had the foresight to put in my purse. Opal put her hand over mine for a moment, said nothing. And I was grateful for that. For her silence, for her presence, for the warmth of another person's hand. Amanda was beautiful. I want to say that because it's true and because I am not interested in being the kind of woman who can't say true things about people she has reason not to like. She was radiant in the way brides are radiant, caught in a moment that belongs entirely to them. I watched her walk down the aisle and I thought, she has no idea we're here. And then I thought, or maybe she does. The reception was in the same venue, through a set of double doors that opened into a space strung with lights. We had not planned to go to the reception. We had talked about it and decided the ceremony was enough, that we had made what we came to make and didn't need to press further. But then Craig found us in the hall as people were moving from one room to the other. He walked over quickly, the way people walk when they're trying not to look like they're hurrying. His jaw was tight. "Mom," he said. He glanced at Opal. "What are you doing here?" "Watching you get married," I said. "Isn't that what mothers do?" "I asked you not to come." "You said it would be better if I didn't," I said. "That's different from asking me not to come." Something moved across his face. Anger, I thought at first. But it wasn't quite anger. It was more like someone who has been caught in a story they told themselves, standing now in front of the actual truth of the thing. "This is not the place to do this," he said. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm standing in a hallway. I watched you say your vows," I cried, which is what mothers do at their children's weddings. I paused. "I'm very happy for you, Craig. I mean that." He stared at me for a long moment. Opal was quiet beside me. She had her own version of this conversation to have with Derek. Or not to have. That was her business, not mine. "We can talk," Craig said finally, "but not here?" "Okay," I said. "Not here. But we're going to talk." He walked away. A woman came out from somewhere and linked her arm through his, and they moved into the reception together. His shoulders were stiff. I watched him go. Opal and I drove back toward Atlanta and stopped at a diner in Fayetteville. We sat in a booth and ordered breakfast food because sometimes breakfast food at 6 o'clock in the evening is exactly the right thing. We were quiet for a while, in the comfortable way of people who have shared something significant and don't need to fill the air around it immediately. "How do you feel?" she asked me eventually. I thought about it honestly. "I feel like myself," I said, "which I haven't for a while." She nodded. She understood what I meant. I didn't transform anything that day. I want to be honest about that, because I think the stories we tell about moments like these often make them cleaner than they are. Craig and I didn't have a tearful reconciliation in the parking lot. Amanda did not come running out to apologize. No one gave a speech. There was no music swelling in the background. What happened was smaller than that, and I think larger. Craig called me the following Wednesday. He said he wanted to meet for dinner, just us, without Amanda or anyone else. His voice was different from the last time we'd spoken. Less guarded, or maybe just tired of being guarded. We met at a barbecue place we both liked. A place we'd gone to when he was in high school, and things were good between us. We talked for 3 hours. Real talking. The kind that hurts going in and feels necessary once it's started. He told me things about the past 2 years that I hadn't fully understood. Pressures from Amanda's family, his own fear of not measuring up, the way he'd sometimes felt caught between two worlds and had chosen the path of least resistance without thinking carefully enough about what he was sacrificing. He didn't make excuses. He made explanations, which is different. I told him what my absence from his wedding would have cost me, not in anger. I had moved past anger, or at least past the kind that needs raising its voice. I told him what it had felt like to sit in the back of that room and watch him become a husband, to cry into a tissue alone in the back row of my own son's wedding. I told him that I had raised him to be better than the choices he had made, and that I knew he was better than them, and that knowing that was the reason I was still sitting across a table from him instead of somewhere far away licking my wounds. He was quiet for a long time after I said that. Then he said, "I know, Mom. I know. We didn't solve everything that night. Relationships don't solve themselves in a single dinner any more than they break in a single phone call. But we started something in that barbecue place on a Wednesday night that felt like the beginning of getting honest with each other. Opal and I stayed in touch. We text sometimes, share pictures of our gardens. Her tomatoes, she tells me, are better than mine, which I dispute. We have met for coffee 3 times since the wedding, always at a diner roughly equidistant between Marietta and Decatur, always for longer than either of us planned. She told me last fall that Derek came to see her. He drove up to Marietta on a Sunday unexpectedly and sat at her kitchen table for an hour. He didn't say much. He drank 2 cups of her coffee and helped her fix a gutter that had come loose from the back of the house. When he left, he hugged her for a long time, longer than he had in years. He didn't say why. She didn't ask. Sometimes, she told me, that's how they say what they can't say out loud. I think about that a lot. There are things I know now that I didn't know before all of this happened. I know that love does not protect you from being hurt by the person you love. I know that raising someone well doesn't immunize them against making poor choices, because they are people, not projects. And people go sideways sometimes, even the good ones. I know that showing up, quietly, without performance, without asking for anything, is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do. I know that I could have stayed home. I could have cried into my cornbread and let the whole day pass without me in it. Let the photographs be taken and the cake be cut and the first dance danced, all without me there to see any of it. I could have made it easier, the way Craig asked. But I am 63 years old, and I have worked hard and loved hard, and I have earned the right to take up space in my own son's life. Not because I am perfect, not because I never made mistakes, but because I am his mother, and that is not a role that gets revoked because it has become inconvenient. I am Craig's mother. That is not a small thing. It never was. I have had a lot of time to think about what Craig did and what I did, and what all of it means now that some of the dust has settled. I don't think there's a clean answer. I don't think life usually offers those. But I do think there's something true in what happened, something worth sitting with. Craig made choices, not out of cruelty exactly, but out of a kind of moral laziness. That is, in some ways, harder to forgive than cruelty. Cruelty at least knows what it's doing. What Craig did was softer than that. He chose the path that asked the least of him in the moment, and he did not stop to count what it would cost someone else. That is not a character flaw you're born with. That is a habit you build, slowly, one small compromise at a time, until one day you are standing outside a wedding venue telling your mother it would be better if she stayed home. What I know about cause and effect, not in any grand cosmic sense, just in the plain, ordinary sense of how actions ripple outward, is that the things we do to people do not disappear. They stay. They live in the room with you long after you think you've closed the door on them. Craig thought he was managing a situation. What he was actually doing was teaching me something about who he had become, and teaching himself something about the kind of man he was willing to be. Those lessons don't unhappen, and yet, he called me. He came to dinner. He sat across from me in a barbecue place we'd gone to when he was 17 and the world was simpler. And he talked to me honestly, maybe for the first time in years. That matters. It matters because it means something. In him still knew the difference between right and wrong, still felt the weight of what he'd done, still wanted to be better than his worst choices. That is not nothing. In fact, I think that is everything. What I learned from Opal is something I want to hold on to. She drove to that venue in Burgundy, steady and quiet, not to cause a scene, but to refuse to be erased. There's a difference between those two things, and knowing the difference requires a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with education. It is the intelligence of a person who has thought carefully about their own worth and decided not to negotiate it away for someone else's comfort. I think about the woman I was before that phone call on a Tuesday, the one who would have stayed home, who would have told herself it was gracious, who would have swallowed the hurt and smiled about it later. I understand that woman. I was her for a long time, but I am not interested in being her anymore. What I want, going forward, is to be the kind of person who shows up. Not loudly, not to prove a point, but because showing up is what you do when you know your own value and you have decided, quietly and without apology, to act accordingly. Craig is learning that. I am still learning it too. That is, I think, what the rest of this life is for.